In this episode of Linux News Log, a Linux Nettop, Codeweavers releases crossover for Games 8.0, and 25 Linux tips for Windows switchers. QuickSurf Internet Media presents Linux News Log, separating the Linux and open source signal from the noise. Hey everybody, I'm your host Adrian, coming to you almost live from Studio BR2 here at QuickSurf Internet Media in Phoenix, Arizona. Linux News Log is a proud member of the Tech Podcast Network. If it's tech, it's here. Do feel free to check them out over at techpodcasts.com. Let's get into the stories for episode number 182. Our first story for this episode is from liliputing.com, and it's entitled "A VIA C7 Processor Makes a Comeback" in Linutop 3 Linux Nettop. Basically, this is a tiny little computer that runs Linux. It's got a 1 gigahertz VIA C7 processor. You can put 1 to 2 gigs of RAM in it. It has a 2 gigabyte solid state disk, so basically the equivalent of a little thumb drive is plugged into that thing. VGA, DVI outputs, 6 USB ports, 2 audio in and audio out ports, and internally it has 2 SATA connectors and 1 PCI Express slot. Ethernet, it weighs 3.9 pounds. Believe it or not, it uses 30 watts of power and comes installed with Ubuntu Linux, which is obviously my favorite distribution, at least as of late. Before we go on with the rest of the stories for this episode, we do need to talk about our sponsor for this episode, which is GoToAssist Express by Citrix. If you're still trying to fix technical problems in person or blindly over the phone, you're wasting your time. Support smarter with the new remote support service, GoToAssist Express, brought to you by Citrix. Easily view and control another computer online so you can quickly resolve their technical issues. It's easy for customers. It's easy for you. Try GoToAssist Express free for 30 days. For this special offer, you must visit gotoassist.com/techpodcast. That's gotoassist.com/techpodcast for a free trial. All right, for this segment, we've got a story from PC World called Top 5 Features of the New Red Hat Linux. In this particular story, it's from Stephen J. Von Nichols. It's actually pretty in-depth. I'm not going to give you every little thing that he writes because it's actually a pretty long story, but I will give you the top 5 reasons if you want to see in depth how his explanation of why those made it into his top 5 list. Then by all means go check the story out. But in the meantime, the first reason is baked-in virtualization, high-end processor support, better support for high-speed networking, improved programming tools, and virtual desktops. And I think this is a pretty good list. High-end processor support, that's always a good thing. You can never have too much. Improved programming tools, I find that attractive simply because I am a computer programmer and I like to have good tools. Baked-in virtualization is also nice, especially if you're a developer and you're testing stuff out. So definitely check that out. I want to point that at my mouth. The next story that we have is from slipperybrick.com. Shuttle unveils the X500V all-in-one Linux PC. It's called the X50 all-in-one PC. It comes with OpenSUSE Linux already installed, which is nice. It's only 3.6 centimeters thick, which is actually not that thick at all. Has an Atom 330 dual-core CPU, which is kind of nice. 1 gig of RAM. They have a 160 gig hard drive. Bunch of other features and functionality. And right now it's only sold in Europe. Kind of a bummer. So for those of you who are in Europe, definitely check it out. For the US users, hopefully at some point, hopefully at some point, it will be released here in the US. So I'll be definitely keeping an eye out for that, because I love all-in-ones. Not really, but you know. For our tips, tricks, how-tos segment, I've got an article from Ethiopian Review. It's entitled 25 Linux Tips for Windows Switchers. Personally, I think this is great simply because you know, there's a lot of Windows switchers that are totally lost, and I can completely understand, because I was never always a Linux user, and even to this day I don't use Linux as my primary machine. So a lot of the stuff, even myself, a lot of the stuff that you can do in Linux, you know, I just simply forget because I don't use it every day. I try to keep my skills up, but you know, that's just how it is. So they list 25 tips for people who are switching from Windows to Linux. I personally found it pretty useful, even if you're a Linux user but you don't use Linux every day. Some of my most favorite ones is don't be afraid of the terminal. Duh. You're going to have to get in the terminal at some point. You really do need to know your way around the terminal. Learn about repositories. Invaluable. If you don't know what's in the repositories, a lot of times, you know, that's a shortcoming if you don't know what's in the repositories. Look around before you ask. More often than not, you know, use the Googles, use the Yahoos, go to Linux questions. You know, there are a lot of places where people ask questions, and more often than not, your question is not unique to you, and there's an answer posted out there somewhere. So, you know, before you ask, just take, you know, a couple of minutes and do a quick internet search and look to see if there's anything that already addresses it. Keep notes. This is the biggest thing. Most people don't do this. Personally, I think it's invaluable to keep notes, because especially on a computer I don't use every day, it's difficult to remember how you configured it if you didn't keep notes without going back in and looking, and you know, that's a humongous productivity waster. So definitely keep notes. If it's something you've never done before and you don't think you're going to remember it again. Personally, I actually have I don't have it within quick reaching distance, but I have a notebook that I use, and I keep notes with it. You know, for stuff that I might have to replicate later. If it's not just a simple little, you know, pop into the terminal and do some stuff, you know, if it's like pretty long, I'll actually keep notes of it, type it up, you know, the steps that I need to do, what I'm doing, da 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 da, and then I'll print it out and keep an electronic copy of it on my main computer, and I'll also keep a paper copy of it in a little binder, notebook binder, and that's invaluable. I can't tell you how invaluable that is to be able to reference that later, especially if it's been sitting there for a year. Like I've got one computer that I don't log into except maybe, you know, a couple times a month, and it runs some background processes here at my house, and you know, it's handy to keep notes on what you've done. Believe me, it really is. So definitely check that article out. And that's pretty much it for the tips, tricks, and how-tos segment. Well, that about does it for this edition of Linux News Log. As always, everything we've talked about is linked up in the show notes at linux.quicksurf.com. If you have questions, comments, or concerns, please email me, linux@quicksurf.com, or follow me at twitter.com/Adrian_bacon. I'll have all that linked up in the show notes as well. Also, every way you can get a hold of me besides that is also linked up in the show notes. There's a bevy of ways online you can get a hold of me, so definitely go to the website, look at the show notes for whichever is the latest episode. I'll have everything linked up there. And with that, I thank you for watching or listening to Linux News Log, and I'll see you all on the next episode. See you then. Bye.